Let's kill two birds with one stone and talk about inputting a single melodic line into Suno, single instrument, and we'll also see how Suno deals with an older style. In this case, does Suno know anything about creating a medieval-like sound? One of the problems with medieval music is there's not a lot of notated examples for one. There's no recordings, obviously, so most people, in terms of performance practice, they'll look at drawings, they'll look at some writing, they'll try and figure out what these older instruments were and how they could be played. And from a lot of that and some existing music, they'll try and figure out how people actually played this. Also, from knowing what the church music, the sacred music was at that time, secular music like this wasn't really performed in the church. It could be performed in the streets, maybe at some courts. Common people might be playing this and singing stuff like this. There's not a lot to go on in terms of what did it actually sound like. Composers might be asked to write music in an older style for a production of some sort, and often this older medieval-like sound is asked for. And to be honest, most times you hear some stereotypical dance kind of music with drums and different medieval instruments. They certainly would be used during that time, but exactly the drumming patterns that would be used and other things like that, a lot of that's kind of made up nowadays when you hear this kind of stuff to satisfy the tastes of a more modern public. So let's see, here's a saltarello, a 13th, 14th century dance, kind of 6/8 fast dance. This is a kind of a well-known tune. Since there isn't that much notated medieval music, most of it you may have heard if you are into this at all. I put this dance into Notion. I have an oboe playing it. I actually modified it a bit. There are 3 sections, each of which ends in a similar fashion. I only have 2 of them, and I repeated the first one at the end just to create a piece to see what Suno's going to do with it. Because if you just give Suno a little bit of music, it has a tendency to create on its own to fill in a time. We'll see what happens if I only give Suno the first part of this, and then we'll give the whole thing to it and see how things change. So here's what the dance sounds like. And I just repeat the beginning again here. Let's put this into Suno and see what Suno's going to do with it. Well, that was kind of what I expected. I've run numerous versions of this, and almost always Suno's going to come in with a big drum, almost epic banging away, trying to make things more full-blown than would probably really be done back then. You can hear Suno will try and impose some modern tonality on there, though with medieval settings, Suno's not going to go overboard. A lot of times it'll just put some long pedal tone in the background, and that's probably more appropriate for what might be done back then. You can hear Suno will impose a few extra melodic lines. It'll bring in some harmonies that are probably not in style, but more to the modern taste. Obviously, this almost has a kind of Irish dance lilt to it. Suno kind of borrows from a lot of those kind of trainings, and it's not really medieval music. I don't think a medieval performance practice group would take too kindly to this, but it's listenable. And for a lot of productions, that's what a lot of people might expect. Now, Suno did do something a little strange on one of the creates. It changed the mode of everything, and it made it quite different. I don't know why it decided to do that. It might even be more in style, though the mode that's chosen is a little strange in how it's developed. But listen to this one. Well, that was interesting. It really kind of turned that into a modal minor version and changed the bass line around, had that kind of stereotypical going down a minor second, going down a minor second, then back up again. Now, I did set that to 100% medieval style, so maybe that led Suno to try and do something different. I've set it to 100% for other things, and it didn't go to such extremes, so there must be some kind of algorithm it uses to decide when it wants to do something different or not. But what happens if we give Suno not enough music? Here's a case where I just fed it the first section and then asked Suno to do something. Well, Suno wants to try and create a couple minutes worth of music, and I didn't give it enough for Suno to try and just repeat over and over again. I think it thinks that is going to be boring or has some algorithm that is musical in that way. And when you do that, if you don't give it enough music, Suno just figures, hey, you didn't give me enough? I'll invent some stuff on you in this style maybe that you've given me. So let's see what happens when I don't give Suno enough music. I kind of think we know what Suno is going to do. If you ask for medieval dance, you're going to get this pseudo-Irish, pseudo-medieval, pseudo-river dance, who knows what kind of output. Sounds good, but it's not medieval music. Let's try something a little different, though. Let's go over to the sacred side and see what happens if we start feeding it some chant. Is it going to give me some chant back? That's okay. Or is it going to modernize that and go to town on that? So let's feed Kyrie some Gregorian chant. I have a Kyrie here, pretty well known. What I'll do first, because we want Suno to get a feel for where the text is in this very melismatic piece. Most of the syllables are going to be sung on A in this. We'll put the Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison in the lyric part for Suno, because Suno's going to think this is a song then. And then we need to try and tell Suno, where will the main words come? Now, you can go in and sing yourself. It doesn't matter how bad your voice is. Suno will usually pick up where the words should go. But what I'll do is I'll use Studio, which is another AI program that lets you import a MIDI file. And to that, you can put a voice and put text to that voice and pick one of a lot of different voices. So what I'll do is I'll try and get close to where the words go. And Studio doesn't do a very good job on the melismatic stuff, but at least I'll have something that we can start with and feed that into Suno. So here's what I created. I won't play you everything, just the beginning part of it. And this is what I'll feed into Suno to get my chant out. So it's a Kyrie with a Kyrie section, a Christe section, a Kyrie section, and then another Kyrie at the end. And I recorded this with the Studio AI voice. Now, all I want to do here is give Suno an idea of where the syllables of the words are. The AI program, you can hear, doesn't do a very good job of the melisma, but I'm not really worried about that because Suno does a much better job with voices. I started by just playing the first Kyrie part into Suno, thinking that's enough for it to figure out what's going on. And I set my style as Gregorian chant, a cappella, with a male solo, medieval chant, no harmony. I'm trying to tell it, don't give me any harmony. I just want the voice singing alone. And then I told it cathedral space. I want this to be sung in a big reverberant body like a church. No instruments. I also, in the exclusion line, said no harmony. Sometimes, as you'll see, it doesn't matter what you tell Suno. If it wants to do stuff, it's just going to do it. And then I fed Suno the Latin text, because this is kind of a song to Suno, hopefully with a male voice. Following the instructions I gave it, I told it weirdness of 0, set style influence in the middle, and use the audio I'm giving you 100%. I made a number of versions. This is one that's kind of close. See what Suno did. Well, that was pretty nice. It did give me that lower organum part, that second bass line against the melody. But the melody itself was very nicely sung. The melisma comes out kind of on the syllables expected, even though the A Studio version was all screwed up. And remember, this time I only fed it the first Kyrie phrase. So when it got to the Christe, it knew the text there because I put that in the lyrics field. It sang Christe, but there was no music for that. So Suno made up some in an appropriate style, which was nice. And that's not far from maybe what you'd hear in the medieval period. Some of the bass line was going to notes that's a little bit questionable. But if you played that for most people, they would think, yeah, that's old style medieval chant. Well, this time I fed Suno the A Studio vocal for the entire Kyrie. Let's see what it does with this. I changed the settings a little bit. This time I set the style influence to 100%. We have the same kind of style inputs: Gregorian chant, a cappella, male solo, medieval chant, no harmony, cathedral space, no instruments, and no harmony. Let's see what Suno created for this one. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison. Well, that wasn't bad either. It had the full music, so when it got to the Christe part, it was singing the music in the input, but it decided that the input was a little too long and it shortened it. It moved things around. Sometimes it doesn't have Kyrie the way you expect it to be sung. It says a Kyrie, then it starts again. Suno takes its license on how it's going to do things here. So let's say you want to isolate the voice, extract that, and maybe use it against something else or in another piece of yours, because Suno does have some nice voices it can generate. You can create stems, as I've done here, and then export them. And you can see for this piece, it actually had three things. It had the lead vocal, it had backing vocals, and then it had this other part. So now we can go in here and let's just see what the vocal itself sounds like. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Christe eleison. How cool is that? What about this other line, the FX file that they say other in the stems? There's our kind of organum part. Kind of low organ combination sound, a little bit of voice-like sound in there. Might be almost synth-like sounding too. Well, that's taking a little license. That shows you getting stems is a good thing to do if you like the performance and you can use it in some way. And finally, let me play you another version, and this will show you the importance of this exclusion line that you can put in. If I just say no something in the main style section, sometimes it will adhere to what I said, Like, for example, I can say no drums, and most of the times it doesn't put them in, but not all the time. Here we have an example where I put in the exclusion line, no harmony for everything that we've heard so far. And while it did have an organum line, it did have a pedal tone or long sustained note, sometimes moving in parallel motion, true organum style. That I really don't consider true harmony, and I don't think Suno considered it either. But look what happens when I left that harmony out of the exclusion line. I actually said, do not add harmony in the style. But just because you say something as a prompt, it doesn't mean that Suno really understands it. You can put thousands and thousands of things in the prompt line, and people have tried all kinds of things, and some people are convinced their prompts work. And if you use the same thing, you might get something totally different out. So you just have to play with prompts, play with the exclusion line. And here I didn't say no harmony in the exclusion. Let's hear what happened in this case. It's beautiful, but it has nothing to do with medieval music.